Most people think the internet lives in the cloud. It doesn't. It lives on the ocean floor. And in this video, we're going to map the fragile physical arteries that carry 99% of global data, identify the 3 choke points where dozens of cables converge, and explain why damage in those regions can disrupt entire economies within hours. By the end, you'll see why the internet is far less decentralized than it appears. If you zoom out far enough, the cloud disappears. What you find instead is more than 1.4 million kilometers of fiber-optic cable laid across the seabed. Glass strands, thinner than a human hair. Carrying pulses of light, that is the internet, not satellites, not wireless towers, glass. On the ocean floor. Inside each submarine cable are bundles of optical fiber surrounded by layers of protection. At the core are the fibers themselves, transmitting light signals at nearly the speed of physics allows. Around that is a copper sheath that carries electrical power to repeaters placed every 50 to 100 kilometers. Those repeaters amplify the light so it can travel across entire oceans. Then come waterproof insulation layers. Near coastlines, where ship anchors and fishing trawlers are common, cables are wrapped in thick protective plating. In the deep ocean, thousands of meters down, the cable is thinner. There is less human interference there. But thinner doesn't mean invulnerable. Yes, sharks have bitten these cables. In the early years of fiber deployment, engineers discovered that certain shark species were attracted to electromagnetic emissions from repeaters. There were documented cases of sharks damaging insulation. Google engineers even added additional shielding to newer systems after incidents in the Pacific. It makes for a dramatic image. A predator biting into the internet. But sharks are not the real threat. The real threats are quieter. Fishing nets dragged across the seabed. Ship anchors dropped in the wrong place. Underwater landslides triggered by earthquakes. In 2006, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck near Taiwan. Multiple cables in the Luzon Strait were severed. Internet connectivity across Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, and much of Southeast Asia slowed dramatically. Financial institutions rerouted traffic. Latency spiked. Trading systems experienced disruptions. Repairs took weeks, not because engineers did not know what to do, but because the ocean is vast, and repair capacity is limited. There are fewer than 60 specialized submarine cable repair ships operating worldwide. These vessels are run by companies like Subcom in the United States, Global Marine Group in the United Kingdom, Orange Marine in France, Alcatel Submarine Networks, NEC in Japan, and Prysmian Group in Italy. Some are public corporations. Some operate under telecom consortia. Some build cables. Some repair them. All of them depend on a small fleet of highly specialized ships. When a cable breaks, a repair vessel must first be available. Then it must travel, sometimes thousands of miles, to the damage site. Using sonar and remotely operated vehicles, crews locate the cable on the ocean floor. They deploy grapnels to hook it, slowly lift it to the surface, cut out the damaged section, splice in new fiber, seal the insulation, test the signal integrity, and carefully lower it back into place. In rough weather, this can take days. In politically sensitive waters, it can take longer. Submarine cables cross exclusive economic zones and territorial waters. Repair ships often require permits. In geopolitically tense regions, entry may be monitored or delayed. Restoration can become political, not just technical. And geography creates something even more concerning. Choke points, the Red Sea, the Strait of Malacca, the Luzon Strait near Taiwan, In these narrow corridors, dozens of cables run side by side along the seabed. They must pass through these regions. There is no alternate ocean. If one cable fails, traffic reroutes. If several fail in the same corridor, congestion builds. Latency increases. Entire regions can experience severe slowdowns or partial isolation. In 2008, multiple cables were cut near Egypt in the Mediterranean. Internet access across the Middle East and parts of South Asia degraded significantly. Millions were affected. Speculation of sabotage circulated. Investigations pointed largely to anchors. But the vulnerability was clear. This is not theoretical fragility. It is documented. And something else has changed. 20 years ago, submarine cables were financed primarily by telecommunications consortia. Today, companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon directly fund and co-own major portions of global undersea infrastructure. Google's Equiano cable connects Europe to Africa. The Two Africa system, backed by Meta, circles an entire continent. Microsoft and Meta co-funded the Maria cable across the Atlantic. Big tech does not just operate cloud platforms. It owns the pipes between continents. The cloud was never abstract. It was always physical. Glass fibers on the seabed, steel armor, copper power lines feeding repeaters, private companies funding intercontinental infrastructure. And it all depends on stable oceans and stable politics. We imagine the internet as decentralized, resilient, everywhere. But when you look at the map, you see convergence, you see clusters, you see choke points, you see fragility where geography forces proximity. Sharks make headlines, but anchors cut cables far more often. Nations watch repair vessels closely. The system works remarkably well, until it doesn't. And when it fails physically. The internet does not float in the sky. It runs through the deep, across narrow straits, through politically tense waters, on infrastructure maintained by a few dozen ships. Owned increasingly by a handful of corporations, we built a digital civilization that feels weightless, but it rests on glass threads lying silently across the ocean floor, invisible, strategic, and far less decentralized than we pretend. If you want to understand the other hidden single points of failure holding up modern life, make sure you're subscribed. Signal and Shadow investigates the systems you rely on, but rarely see. Because the most fragile parts of civilization are often buried beneath the surface, and sometimes beneath the sea.